Hi, this is Matt Hugg with Think NP for another Backstage Pass. And today we have with us Chip Capelli of Chip Capelli Accountant in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And Chip, welcome and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Chip, we've known each other for a while, but maybe you can tell everybody what do you do? What's your work?
I have an accounting office in Provincetown, Massachusetts. My background's primarily in nonprofit accounting and financial management and overall management.
Sure.
And I work with a lot of for-profits, but my master's, as you know, is in nonprofit management. And I feel like that's really helped me a lot with the for-profits because the nonprofits being held to a little bit higher standard over for-profits gives me a little bit more insight into what best practices should be, things like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now that's good to hear that nonprofits are actually
well, when you're dealing with public money and and donations, I think you have a bigger responsibility to be transparent. Yeah. And I try to bring that over to my for-profit clients. Right. As far as, especially if there's business partners involved. You know, I live in a resort community, so a lot of my clients are hotels, restaurants, retail. You know, nobody's looking at their books except the IRS, and I want them to be, especially when it's in a cash economy, I want them to be as transparent as possible so that if anybody does come knocking on their door from the IRS, they're ready.
Right, exactly. And that's huge.
Yes.
Yeah, to be organized and to be ready.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
Preparedness is key.
Yeah. So what did you do? You said you came from a nonprofit background. Tell us, what was that?
For 10 years, I was the CFO of a medium-sized nonprofit in Philadelphia. Towards the end of that time, I decided to go for my master's degree.
Sure.
That was during the time when everybody was getting MBAs, and I didn't want to be in that pool of thousands of MBA graduates. Sure. So I found the nonprofit program. At the time, there was a dozen in the country. Right. Now they're everywhere. Yep. So I feel like I got in on the ground floor, and quite honestly, I didn't quite learn anything new, but it was a really good experience because I'd been doing this work for 20 years. Well, yeah. But I got the assurance that I was on the right track. Okay, that's good. And I met a lot of nice people that are still in my life.
That's super. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So you've worked for-profit businesses. In fact, you do a lot of work right now for for-profit.
Yeah, I was never an employee of a for-profit in the financial area. Right. But right now, my business is I'm a vendor. You know, as an outside accountant, and most of my clients in Provincetown, like I said, are hospitality, retail, things like that. Sure. So they're for-profit. It's not that much different. It's the tax pieces are obviously different because most of those are C corps or S corps. Sure. You know, there is tax liability on a K1, things like that. But I find I bring the nonprofit. The value I bring as having my experience in nonprofit is, like I said, I know what the IRS is looking for and looking at, and I fancy myself an expert in best practices. So I give a lot of that advice. It's my value added is to tell people this is a better way to do this. Sure. I try never to tell people they're wrong. I try to say, you know, this is fine, but here's how you can do it and be totally transparent. And most for-profit folks are receptive of that because in a land where a lot of the transactions are cash-based, there is a level of scrutiny almost equal to that on nonprofits. Oh, right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's in Massachusetts, there's sales tax agents up and down Commercial Street in Provincetown all summer. Trying to say, okay, we see this many people going in his door. Let's see what his sales tax report is for this month. Yes. And you know, I know that's true. And then also, I imagine for the employees who get a lot of cash as well. Right, especially in restaurants. Yeah, there's a lot of tips or cash most of the time. Yep. If you're like me, even if you pay with a credit card, you'd give the server cash. Yep. So that keeps me busy during tax time. Sure, sure. So what is the difference, have you found, if any, in the culture between the nonprofits and the for-profit? Well, in the nonprofit, it's the board. Right. And I do have nonprofit clients on the Cape, and it's the board, and unfortunately, as we've discussed over the years, a lot of boards just aren't familiar with the processes and what works in their business, what works in their candy store or their bed and breakfast doesn't work in a nonprofit. I can give you a bunch of examples of things that happened this past summer. One of my clients was a 501c6, which is a membership organization.
Sure, like a Chamber of Commerce kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the board leadership were equating it with a 501c3, sending donor acknowledgement letters for donations of goods and services.
Sure.
Which was
doesn't work.
Wrong.
Yeah, right. That's
one time where I sent an email saying this is wrong.
Yes, right.
And you're putting your IRS determination letter at risk.
Exactly.
So I sent an email to the board treasurer, and I had links to IRS articles and things like that.
Well, to them, I imagine nonprofit equals nonprofit equals nonprofit.
Nonprofit equals charity.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Which is not always the case, as we know.
Exactly.
I remember taking your class where you gave us a half a day lecture on the NFL. Which is a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But they make lots of money.
Yeah.
And so it's basically education of the board, especially when it's a board made up of well-meaning people who don't have experience in nonprofit.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's hard for me, just from a personality standpoint, to get it across because these are my neighbors.
Yes.
And these are people I do business with in other aspects.
Sure.
So it's hard for me to say, okay, guys, you got to shape up. So I have a whole repertoire of phrases that I use and to educate them. Just recently, in September of this year, just 2 months ago, I had to stand up in front of a membership, and I hated to do it, but I had to use the phrase organizational deficiency. But that's what they finally heard it.
Right.
Without me saying, oh, this is another way to do it.
Yeah.
I had to say, no.
Yep.
You're doing it wrong. And I was heard. And
well, probably because you don't say that all the time.
That's actually some of the feedback I got from some of the folks there.
Right.
Was that hearing that, not even that tone, even hearing those words from me made people sit up and take notice.
Okay.
And I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I was able to prepare a end of year report and new fiscal year budget that probably totaled 30 pages. And this organization in particular had never seen something like that.
Oh, wow.
There was prior leadership had basically just slapped something together on a page.
Right.
And the board treasurer and I spent a lot of time getting this together. And I was actually leaving the organization because, quite frankly, I had had enough. And so, but
it was deficient.
They were deficient. But I didn't want to leave in a huff with bad information. I didn't want a year to go by and have things fall apart and say, well, Chip never told us.
Sure.
So I gave these very detailed narratives and spreadsheets with as much detail as possible. And I remain available for questions to the new executive director. And
so this was the place you were volunteering?
No, I was their paid outside accountant.
Oh, okay.
And it was time for me to move on. There was changes in the leadership, and without getting into all the grisly details. And I don't want to necessarily get into the details that way, but this is an interesting point. What makes you decide this just doesn't work for me, and how does that happen? Well, as I said, I was very firm at this one meeting where I said this was an organizational deficiency.
Yeah.
I had a year of, we need to pay attention to this. This isn't working. You're doing this in a way that needs to be done a different way.
Sure.
And there comes a point where, the only way people are going to step and pay attention is if I walked away.
Yeah. And taking their money was not the right thing to do at that point.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, you could have just said, okay, fine, and off you go.
And again, it's a small town, and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So the board treasurer and I, along with a couple other board members, ended up leaving. And one gentleman who was a business leader in town had stood up at that meeting and said, would you be willing to, I understand, I hear you, and I understand why you want to leave, but can you not walk away on the day that your notice is, will you stay available? And I'm like, I said, you know me. I mean, you've known me for a long time. Yeah. Does that sound like me?
Yeah.
And I have made myself available. But it was taking up, the money was irrelevant. It was taking up more time and emotion because it was an organization that I was passionate about at one time.
Did you, you've helped obviously to ease the transition to somebody else?
Right. There's another book. There's a couple.
There's one more?
No, there's a couple others. But he and I just saw him last week at an event, and he and I joked about how we play volleyball with certain clients.
Yeah, right, yeah, back and forth.
And, he's a good guy, so, and he was my recommendation.
Sure.
And, in fact, the new executive director said to me, who do I go to?
Yeah.
And my first response was, finding you a new accountant is not my job, but here's who I would call.
Yeah.
And whether he takes you is another story.
Yeah.
And so it all worked out.
Yeah.
You know, and people need to work with other people. There's a
of course.
There's a lifespan to these things. I keep saying it's a small town. It's a very small town, and there is a lifespan to that. That's why I believe in board term limits and things like that, because people need to work with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a town like that, it's likely to cycle back to you anyhow at some point.
Right. Unfortunately, this organization does not have board term limits.
Sure.
So
somebody needs to have the hard conversation with people, which is hard to do.
And it hasn't happened. So when I think about when I think about the board members who left, those were the wrong board members to leave.
Yeah, that often happens.
Yeah.
Well, that's we can talk about term limits and all that another day. So how did you get started in independent work in consulting?
Well, the organization where I was for 10 years gave me the opportunity to resign 9 years ago.
Right.
I prided myself, and I still do, on counseling people on knowing when it's time to move on.
Yeah.
I didn't see that myself.
Oh, then interesting.
So I was called into the executive director's office on a Monday in October in 2007. And he sat down, we need to talk. And I said, okay. I said, I know what you're going to say. Let's make it painless and friendly. And it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it truly was. I was given time. I was given a party. I was given a nice package. Probably not as nice as the one I would have given somebody else.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, right.
And right around that time, a good friend of mine, another old nonprofit guy, an MSW, had started as the executive director of another nonprofit in Philadelphia that I was very familiar with. And they needed somebody, but not full time.
Right.
So I started there. Actually, tomorrow is my 9th anniversary with them.
Okay.
And then in my graduate program, another instructor knew somebody else who needed somebody maybe 1 day a week, and I took that. And then I think a year or two after that, I started doing taxes during tax season in a more organized way. I always did a dozen or so tax returns for people I knew. Yeah. But then I kind of made that a segment of my business, and it just grew. And then people talk, and and it's I had a friend who was on a board where I had been working, another board. She was on that board. She was on another board. They needed a 10-hour a month accountant.
Okay.
I'm still with them.
Well, and you did something very interesting. I think a lot of people would be afraid to do. You pulled up stakes and moved.
Well, this all started I went out my own in 2007, 2008.
Right.
By 2010, I had some significant life changes. My closest friend passed away. And she and I had always talked about retiring to Cape Cod someday.
Sure.
And a couple months after that, I had pretty serious surgery. And I was recuperating on my couch for about a month, and it was snowing. And between the snow and the recuperation, I was housebound for about 6 weeks.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was reading a book. I'd like to read murder mysteries. I was reading this, and I thought, why don't I just move there? I remember this as clear as day. I was sitting on the couch thinking, why don't I just move to Provincetown? I was going to do it anyway. Yeah. So that was January of 2010. And you can't just pull up stakes, or I couldn't.
Yeah, no, it sounds simpler than it really is.
It took me about 3 years.
Yeah.
So in October of 2013, almost 4 years after I made that initial proclamation.
Sure.
I got a phone call from a friend of mine who lives up in Provincetown, who manages rental properties, and said, hey, I got a rental property, a winter rental from October to May. Are you interested? And I thought, sure, let me try it out. Yeah. 6 months is a good stretch.
And winter is good.
Winter is a great time
to test them.
If you can make it in the winter, anybody can go there in the summer.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So I went there. my big fear was not being able to make a living, not making any friends.
Right.
That both of those things happened pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I had a friend who had a gallery, and I became his accountant. I got in fairly quickly. I got a condo association fairly quickly. Then I did a lot of taxes. And I became, the guy in town, the tax guy.
Yeah.
And by the time the winter rental was up, I found a year round.
Right.
I sold my house in South Philly the next year because I wanted to make sure it really took.
Yep.
And then I rented an office downtown, which you visited me in. And then about a year after that, across the hall was a bookkeeping office. And the owner of that had decided, self-employment wasn't really for him.
Right.
Did I want his clients? We sat down and worked out a deal, and with the clients came the really big office.
Yes.
And a payroll segment, which I had not done payroll.
Okay.
So I moved across the hall, inherited his employees, started doing payroll.
Right.
And it's been growing ever since. We do payroll for, in the high season, probably 30, and everything, candy stores, retail, restaurants, hotels.
The big issue, though, that a lot of people look at is now I have my established clients here. How do I essentially restart? But you've kept a lot of clients.
My biggest clients here in Philadelphia area and Delaware are still my clients.
Right.
In fact, tomorrow I'm doing a nonprofit audit with my biggest client, which is in Kensington section of Philadelphia.
Sure.
And I'll stay with them as long as they'll have me. It works. The executive director and I have known each other for over 20 years. He knows I know what I'm doing.
Right.
He trusts me that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And we talk almost every day. And I have people in my office who now I've grown to the point where someone in my office manages his accounts payable for that organization.
Sure.
I manage the payroll. Then I do financial statements for the board. I don't need to be in the next office to do that. And that's the beauty of the world we live in.
Yeah.
We all complain about the internet, and I do. But this is what keeps me there. My client in Delaware, I reconcile the bank statements, payroll, and prepare financial statements.
Right.
That's pretty straightforward. I have an excellent relationship with that executive director. And then another one is a community economic development nonprofit.
Sure.
Again, straight bookkeeping. I don't need to be there.
Yeah.
Even when I lived in Philadelphia, I never went there.
Well, and you have family in the area.
I'm from South Jersey.
So you come back every once in a while.
Thank goodness for my Amtrak points.
There you go.
And I come to see my family. We're recording this the week of Thanksgiving.
Sure.
And I'm down for a week, and then I'll be down for Christmas for 3 weeks. And it's close enough. I tell people I could leave my apartment at breakfast and be at my parents' house for dinner.
Right.
Which I'm not cross country.
Yeah.
And my clients, thank goodness, in the 3+ years, we've never had an issue where it was critical for me to be there.
Yeah.
I call into board meetings.
Okay. So you really use technology to build these bridges.
Yeah.
After you've kind of established yourself personally.
And then my clients in Provincetown, sometimes I'll come home for a long weekend, not even tell them I'm leaving town.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't need to know. If something, like they know I'm home for Thanksgiving. Yeah. They know I'm home for Christmas. But if I leave because my dad's birthday is over the weekend, I'm gone from Thursday to Monday. Yeah. I don't need to announce it.
Right.
Everything goes smoothly. We run payroll on Mondays. Max is great.
It's one of your staff.
Max, yes, he's my payroll manager, and friend. He's my conscience and he's the one you got to, you don't charge enough.
Yeah, right. So, that's interesting. So do they? That's a struggle that everybody has in consulting. Is do you charge enough or not? Especially with nonprofits, because that they have this great mission that they have to accomplish.
I use a number of factors. I don't publish rates ever anywhere, just for that reason. Yeah. It's not always based on budget. Right. It's based, and my good friend Steve told me once, for taxes, when I was first getting into taxes, how do you know what to charge? And he says, you charge what you think they'll pay. And you find out what their budget is. Yeah. And I have, now my largest client I've been with for 9 years, they pay me what they paid me 9 years ago. Right. And I'm happy to do that. To me, my raise is being able to live in Massachusetts and work for them in Philadelphia. Sure. Same thing with Delaware, same thing with that other nonprofit. In Provincetown, when I bought the company that became my company, I honored the bookkeeping price.
Right.
Now, what's happened is new clients, we talk, and it's not significantly higher than what the bookkeeping price is. But what I found with the legacy clients, as I call them,
yes,
they were offering them a higher level of service, so there's more hours involved.
Right.
And nobody works in nonprofit to get rich.
Yeah.
I didn't work and quite honestly, I moved there to have a quality of life where I look out my window and I see the beach.
Yeah.
And I don't need $1 million to do that. And quite honestly, I don't want to work. I don't want to give my life over to work. I've done that.
Yeah.
And as long as I can support my office and my staff and myself, I don't feel the need. I'm not the cheapest guy in town. I'm not the most expensive guy in town.
Right.
I'm probably the nicest, which is my niche. I mean, people ask me what my
I would believe that. Yes.
Someone asked me what my superpower was, who's now a client, and I said I make people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And people, and especially with taxes and accounting. I had a gentleman in my office last week, his first year in business in Provincetown, came in with this giant binder, and I said, you don't need all this paper. It's all in QuickBooks, your bank has, He's like, and I get it. He has a significant investment in his business.
Sure.
And at the end of it, I don't think I told him anything he didn't know.
Yeah.
But when he left, he was way more relieved than when he came in.
Right.
And that was worth. And of course, I gave a free consultation. So
there you go.
So he got and you know what? I made a contact, and I know I'll get a tax client out of that. And
he'll talk.
And he'll talk. And so those are things about being in a small town. I come from a small town, and I like making connections with people. I like going to the supermarket and seeing somebody that I did their taxes for and asking them how they are. Or, the priest at the local Episcopal church. I like seeing him. I've done some work with them. And, I've done work, the PTA. Those things, I do their $9.90 for free.
Yeah.
I'm not going to not do that. Those are the things, those are the reasons I moved there.
Right.
And I think my nonprofit experience actually has made me more successful, even though I don't work directly in that all the time.
Right.
And I find when I do talk to people and I say, I have a master's in nonprofit management, you hear a gasp because people, look, it's difficult.
Yeah.
But people think it's brain surgery.
Yeah.
And it's not. I mean, it takes thought and it takes planning and it takes a certain level of intelligence. I certainly don't think I'm smarter than anybody, but that gives me a lot of credibility. And actually, I have that diploma from Eastern. My desk it's right up on the wall right there, and I'm very proud of that. And my Stockton University diploma.
Yeah, that's
which
cool.
I have to get a new diploma from Stockton because it still says. It still says
college?
It still
State college?
says Stockton State College.
There you go.
That's how old I
am. Well, so it sounds like you figured out a lot of. I'll ask you directly. What's the best way to get clients?
Word of mouth.
Okay.
I got cards made when I first moved to Provincetown.
Sure.
And I bought these the little acrylic holders, the hold business cards.
Yeah.
And then there's a cardboard version of it where you have to do some fold and it can be stapled to a bulletin board.
Oh, yeah.
So supermarkets, gyms, delis, coffee shops.
Oh, that's funny.
And I have a Facebook page, which people don't really know about till after they've come to me.
Right.
But they like it, and I guess it shows up, and I really don't know how any of that works. And but it's word of mouth.
Yeah.
I always ask, who can I thank for sending you to me?
Right. Right.
And
that's a good question.
Yeah.
That really
is. Yeah. The other way sounds gossipy.
Yeah.
How'd you find me?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I pride myself. Something else I really pride myself on, which doesn't come up a lot, as much as I would like it to.
Sure.
It's confidentiality.
Oh, interesting.
And I had a gentleman come in my office a couple weeks ago who I knew had been referred from somebody. He said, Johnny referred me to you. Mm-hmm. And then he said, and I saw Sammy. And he said, you do his taxes. I said, oh, really? I can't.
Yeah, right. You can't confirm or deny.
I just saw him and he said you did. I was like, okay. How can I help you?
Right,
And I really, I think that gives me a lot of credibility and I gain a lot of trust.
Right.
I know, I joke I have half the town's social security numbers on my external hard drive, and I know all their financial information. And sometimes it's hard. There's 2,500 people in town in the off season. I go to dinner with friends. I'm like, he shouldn't be out here spending that kind of money on dinner, and or just. I know it's like being a priest, or or a therapist. A lot of stuff. I've had more people cry in my office,
I'm sure,
than I would have liked.
Yeah.
But I'm also glad that they're comfortable enough to open themselves up to me at that level.
Right.
And I think that gives me a lot of value.
Yeah, and that helps you work with them.
Right.
Much
right.
more.
The honesty.
Right.
I can really think of one person that I've had difficulty with in Provincetown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. That's cool.
And this person, everybody has problems with. As my old friend Greg Goldman used to say, if you think somebody's a jerk, chances are everybody does.
Yeah, right.
And he didn't use the word jerk, but
right.
I don't know who's seeing this.
Yeah. So, what are there particular issues? I mean, obviously you would say taxes, I would imagine, right? But are there particular infrastructure issues that you think people ought to pay attention to? Maybe as a consultant, just getting into business, not necessarily a tax thing, but just coming to your own.
Well, if you're starting your own business, be fair to yourself when billing. Be careful how much money you spend, especially the first year.
Right.
Don't rent an office unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
I worked out of my home until I moved to Provincetown.
Right.
Of course, I had a much bigger house and I had an office.
Yeah.
But don't incur expenses.
Right.
In other words, I have an office rent, but I have people working for me, and it's necessary.
Yeah. And you have a public clientele now that comes in on a regular basis, and that makes a difference.
I get a significant amount of drop-ins.
Right.
And but basically, be fair to yourself when it comes to your fee. Because once you say a number, it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
I read a finance book once, and it said the first person who mentions a number loses.
Yes. Yeah. Negotiations. Yeah. Right.
And when I bought my business, the gentleman I bought it from, who were friends, he said, "Well, how much do you think it's worth?" I'm like, "No. You tell me how much you think it's worth. Yeah, and then we'll go from there."
Right.
And we made a fair deal. And
well, it's funny, you see that in those television shows where you're coming into a pawn shop and they say, "So what do you want?" It's never, "This is what it's worth." What I'm going to give you.
Something's only worth what somebody else is willing to pay.
That's totally true. Yeah.
When it comes to houses, jewelry, services, art.
Right.
That's important.
But in a nonprofit context, do you soften that at all?
Yes. There's a reason I got into nonprofit. Because I've never really been money driven.
Right.
I want to work with folks who are committed to making their community a better place.
On the other hand, you want to eat.
Right. So, but I also don't need to make 7 times what I'm making.
Right.
And I also know what the market will bear. So for even the folks, my restaurant and bar and retail clients, just by virtue of being where they are, they're committed to making the community better, even though they're for profit.
Right.
So that's kind of how my take on things is. What are you doing to make the town better? What are you doing to make your world better? Yeah. And that's I worked in a law firm for a number of years before, with an accounting degree. I was a paralegal, and I didn't start using my accounting degree until I was probably 30. And it was a nonprofit, and I've really never worked in a for-profit accounting as an employee. And because I knew friends who I have a good friend who worked at Whole Foods, and it was all about getting those reports, and I've never worked. The biggest place I ever worked had 30 employees. Right. I like
So you found kind of what you liked.
Yeah,
that
I
way.
like having a small office in a small town where I can walk down the street, I see 3 clients on my way to work. I go out to dinner and I see another 2 or 3. It's just it's what I always wanted for myself.
Sure. Well, that's great.
Like I said, I come from a small town and it's perfect.
Well, is there anything else you think that folks would benefit from knowing, just based on your experience, who are in consulting to nonprofits?
Yeah, I think, especially for folks that are new to nonprofits.
Right.
Because I think when I was at Eastern, it was when the economy went south, and a lot of people were downsized out of jobs. Suddenly discovered nonprofits. It's okay to use your for-profit background in nonprofits. They can benefit from that.
Sure.
But there's a huge cultural difference.
Yeah.
Right now, what's going on in the world with a businessman becoming president, you can't run a government the way you run a hotel.
Yes.
Just like you can't run a nonprofit the way you run a for-profit. But there's lots of things you can take from that.
Right.
That are really applicable, which is why I think I'm successful. Because I can squeeze $1, and I can stretch money, I can advise people how to improve their infrastructure in an affordable way, not a cheap way, but an affordable way. And I think that folks shouldn't minimize their experience.
Right.
Just because it's not exactly the same doesn't mean it's not valid.
Yeah.
Everybody's experience is meaningful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you find, I understand a lot of the greatest scientific discoveries, or at least I'll say the greatest discoveries, not necessarily in science, are from people who came from the outside.
Right.
And they took a different perspective on an old problem.
And I thought you were going to say a lot of discoveries came by accident.
Oh, well, that's
which
true
is also true. So you might not find what you're looking for, but you might find something really meaningful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's important.
Chip, thank you so much for being with us today. This has really been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Everybody, this has been Think NP's Backstage Pass, and today we've had with us Chip Capelli, accountant from Provincetown, Massachusetts. And Chip has been great in telling us all about his work and how he serves the nonprofit community.